AITA for getting my roommate's boyfriend kicked out after he basically moved in rent-free? Hi, I, 27F, live in a two-bedroom apartment with my roommate Lena, 26F. We've been living together for a little over a year now, and up until recently things were honestly great. We met through a mutual friend when I was looking for someone to split rent with after my last lease ended. From the start, Lena seemed responsible, easygoing, and most importantly, clean. We got along quickly. We had similar schedules, similar habits, and we both liked having a calm, comfortable home. For the first 8 to 9 months, there were no real issues. We'd occasionally watch movies together, split groceries sometimes, and even celebrated each other's birthdays. We weren't best friends, but we had that ideal roommate dynamic where everything just worked. Then, about 4 months ago, Lena started dating this guy, Mark, 29M. At first, I was genuinely happy for her. She had been single for a while and seemed really excited about him. She talked about him a lot, how he was different, how he was more mature than her exes, all that. The first time I met him, he seemed fine. Maybe a little quiet, but polite enough. He shook my hand, thanked me for letting him hang out. And that was that. In the beginning, he'd come over maybe once or twice a week. Totally normal. I didn't think anything of it. But then it slowly started increasing. Within a few weeks, it became 3 or 4 nights a week. Then most nights. Then basically every night. I remember the first time I noticed it felt off. I came home from work one Friday, and Mark was already there. Not unusual. But then I noticed his shoes were by the door along with an extra pair. And a jacket that I hadn't seen before. I didn't say anything. Over the next couple of weeks, more of his stuff started appearing. A toothbrush in the bathroom. Then a second one. Again, I tried to ignore it at first. I told myself I was overthinking it. People stay over when they're dating. It's normal. But then the patterns became impossible to ignore. He wasn't just visiting. He was living there. He'd be there when I left for work in the morning. He'd still be there when I came back. Sometimes Lena wasn't even home yet, and he'd just be in the living room, watching TV, using our stuff like he belonged there. That's when it started bothering me. Not just because of the presence, but because nothing had been discussed. We have a lease. We split rent 50/50ths. Utilities too. There was never any conversation about a third person essentially moving in, and it wasn't like he was contributing. As far as I could tell, Mark didn't pay for anything. I started noticing small things first. The electricity bill went up. Not drastically, but enough that I noticed. The water bill too. More laundry, more dishes, more everything. Then groceries. I don't mind sharing occasionally, but I started realizing that food I bought would disappear faster. I asked Lena about it casually and she said, "Oh yeah, Mark used some of it. I'll replace it." She never did. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions or cause tension over something that might just need a simple conversation. So I decided to bring it up gently. One evening, when Mark wasn't around, I said something like, "Hey, I just wanted to check in. Mark's been here a lot lately. Are you guys planning on him staying over this much long term?" I tried to keep my tone neutral, not accusatory. Lena immediately got a little defensive. "He's not living here," she said. "He just stays over sometimes." I didn't push too hard. I just said, "I get that. I just noticed it's been almost every day, and I wanted to make sure we're on the same page." She kind of brushed it off and said, "It's not a big deal." That should have been my first red flag. After that conversation, nothing changed. If anything, it got worse. Mark started acting more comfortable. Too comfortable. He'd cook in the kitchen like it was his. Leave dishes in the sink. Sit on the couch with his feet up. One time, I came home early from work, and he was literally in the apartment alone. No Lena. Just him. I asked, "Oh, Lena's not here?" And he casually said, "Yeah, she's running errands. She said it was fine if I stayed." That honestly made my stomach drop a little. Because no, I did not say it was fine. I started feeling like a guest in my own apartment. And it wasn't just discomfort, it started feeling like a boundary issue. I barely knew this guy, and now he had full access to the place I pay half the rent for. I tried bringing it up again a week later, this time a bit more direct. I said, "Hey, I think we need to talk about Mark staying here. It's been pretty constant, and I'm not comfortable with how often he's here, especially when you're not." This time, Lena got more defensive. "He's my boyfriend," she said. "He's allowed to be here." I said, "Of course he is, but there's a difference between visiting and basically living here." She rolled her eyes and said, "You're making it a bigger deal than it is." At that point, I started getting frustrated. I said, "It's not just about him being here. It's also the bills, the groceries, and the fact that I didn't agree to live with two people." She replied, "He's not using that much. And it's temporary anyway." Temporary. That word stuck with me, because she never defined what temporary meant. At that point, I felt like I had two options: keep tolerating it and grow more resentful, or actually set a clear boundary. But I hesitated, because up until this, Lena had been a great roommate, and I didn't want to blow up the situation if it could still be resolved peacefully. So for a little while, I tried to just deal with it. But then things escalated in a way I didn't expect. So after that second conversation with Lena, the one where I clearly said I wasn't comfortable with how often Mark was staying over, things didn't improve. Instead of acknowledging the issue, Lena started acting like I was the problem. She became colder.
Shorter with me.
Conversations that used to be normal, like, "Hey, how was your day?" just stopped happening. It was like the apartment split into two sides overnight. And Mark? He didn't leave. If anything, he leaned into it. At this point, I started paying closer attention, not in a creepy way, but because it was becoming impossible not to notice. He was there every single day. Not most days. Not almost every day.
Every day.
Sleeping there every night. Showering there. Cooking there. Existing there full-time. I don't think he had spent a single night at his own place in weeks. And that's when I realized something that made everything click into place. I had never actually heard Lena mention his apartment. Not once. So one evening, when it was just the two of us in the kitchen, I asked casually, "Hey, where does Mark live, by the way?" She hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Then she said, "Oh, he's between places right now." I immediately felt that sinking feeling in my chest. "Between places?" I asked. "Yeah," she said quickly. "His lease ended, and he's figuring stuff out." I just stared at her for a second, because suddenly everything made sense. He wasn't staying over. He had nowhere else to go. I tried to stay calm, but I could feel my frustration building. "So, he's living here?" I asked. "No," she said immediately. "He's just staying here temporarily." That word again. Temporary. I said, "Lena, he's here 24/7. His stuff is here. He's here when you're not. That's not staying over. That's living here." She sighed, like I was exhausting her. "What do you want me to do?" she said. "Kick him out onto the street?" And that's where things started to shift from frustrating to complicated. Because I'm not heartless. I don't want someone to be homeless. But at the same time, I didn't agree to live with him. And I definitely didn't agree to support him. I told her that. "I'm not saying he can't ever be here," I said. "But this isn't sustainable. If he's living here, then we need to talk about rent, utilities, everything." She immediately shut that down. "He doesn't have money right now," she said. That answer didn't sit right with me. Because if he didn't have money, then how long was this supposed to go on? After that conversation, things became noticeably more tense. Lena stopped trying to hide anything. Mark's presence became permanent. He started leaving his laundry in the shared basket, using my dish soap, my paper towels, even my coffee. Small things individually, but together it added up. And the worst part? Neither of them acknowledged it. No, hey, is this okay? No, we'll replace it. Nothing. It was just expected. The moment that really pushed me over the edge happened about 2 weeks later. I had a long day at work. Like one of those exhausting, mentally draining days where all you want is to come home, eat something, and just exist in peace. I got home around 8 p.m., and the apartment was loud. Music playing, laughter, the smell of food. I walked in, and Mark had two of his friends over. Two strangers. In my apartment, sitting on the couch, drinking, eating, using our space like it was his. I just stood there for a second, honestly not even processing it. Lena saw me and said, "Oh, hey, we're just hanging out." Like this was completely normal. Like I had agreed to this. I asked, "Did you guys plan this?" She said, "Yeah, last minute." I said, "You didn't think to tell me?" And Mark, who, again, I barely knew, goes, "Relax, it's chill." That was it for me.
I didn't yell.
I didn't make a scene. I just turned around, went into my room, and shut the door. But I was furious. Not just because of the situation, but because of the complete lack of respect. This wasn't just about a boyfriend staying over anymore. This was about boundaries being completely ignored. The next morning, I waited until Mark left, which, by the way, was rare, but he had gone out to grab something. And I sat Lena down. This time, I wasn't casual. I wasn't gentle. I was clear. I said, "This isn't working. Mark is living here. He's using utilities, food, space, and now bringing people over. I never agreed to any of this." She immediately got defensive again. "He's going through a hard time," she said. I said, "I understand that. But that doesn't mean I should have to deal with this." She crossed her arms and said, "So, what? You want him gone?" And for the first time, I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said. I told her, if he's going to stay here, then he needs to start paying his share. And if he can't, then he shouldn't be living here. That's when Lena snapped. "He's not a tenant," she said. "You don't get to dictate that." I said, "I absolutely do when it affects me. I'm paying for half of everything, and now I'm basically living with two people." She raised her voice. "You're being selfish." And I said something that, in hindsight, might have escalated things more than I intended. I said, "No. What's selfish is moving someone into a shared apartment without asking and expecting me to just deal with it." There was a long silence after that. And then she said something that honestly shocked me. She said, "Maybe you're just jealous." I actually laughed, like I couldn't help it. "Jealous of what?" I asked. "Of me being in a relationship," she said. "You've been acting weird ever since Mark started staying over." That made something in me snap, because it felt like she was completely twisting the situation to avoid taking responsibility. I told her, "This has nothing to do with jealousy. This has to do with respect. And right now, I don't feel like I have any in my own home." The conversation ended badly. No resolution. No agreement. Just tension. And after that, things got even worse. Because now it wasn't just unspoken frustration. It was open conflict. Passive-aggressive comments. Doors closing harder than necessary. Silence that felt heavy. And Mark? Still there. Like nothing had happened. At this point, I started seriously considering my options. I checked the lease. Technically, only Lena and I are on it. Guests aren't supposed to stay longer than a certain number of consecutive days, which he had definitely exceeded. Which means this isn't just a personal issue. It could become a lease violation. Update. After that last argument, something in me just shifted. Up until then, I'd been second-guessing myself, wondering if I was overreacting, trying to be understanding, giving Lena the benefit of the doubt over and over again. But after being called jealous, after having my concerns completely dismissed and twisted, I was done. Not angry in a loud, explosive way. Just done. The kind of done where you stop arguing because you've already made your decision. For the next couple of days, I didn't bring anything up. I didn't engage. I didn't argue. I didn't even acknowledge Mark beyond basic politeness. But I did start documenting things. Because at that point, I wasn't trying to convince Lena anymore. I was preparing to escalate. About 4 days later, I sent Lena a message while we were both at work. I didn't want another screaming match in the apartment, so I kept it calm and direct. I said, "Hey, I want to be clear about something. Mark has effectively been living here for weeks. This goes against our lease agreement and makes me uncomfortable in my own home. If this continues, I will have to involve the landlord." She didn't respond for hours. And when she did, it was just, do what you want. No discussion. No attempt to fix things. Just that. That was the moment I stopped feeling guilty. Because up until then, part of me felt like I might be overreacting or being too rigid. But that response? It told me she didn't care how this affected me. So I followed through. The next morning, I emailed our landlord. I kept everything factual. No Ishina language, no exaggeration. I explained that there was an additional occupant not on the lease, that he had been staying continuously for weeks, that he was present even when the leaseholder, Lena, wasn't home, that I had attempted to resolve it directly, but nothing changed. I also asked what my options were, because I didn't want to be in violation of the lease myself. The landlord replied the same day. They asked for confirmation and said they would be reaching out to Lena directly. That evening, I came home to tension so thick it was almost physical. Lena was already there. Mark too. And she had clearly already heard from the landlord. She didn't even say hello. She just looked at me and said, "You actually went behind my back?" I stayed calm. "I told you I would," I said. "You're unbelievable," she snapped. "You're trying to get him kicked out." I didn't raise my voice. "I'm trying to enforce the lease we both signed," I replied. Mark finally spoke up. "Seriously? You couldn't just talk like a normal person?" That annoyed me more than I expected. "I did talk," I said. "Multiple times. You just chose to ignore it." What followed was probably the most uncomfortable conversation I've ever had in that apartment. Lena went from angry to desperate to angry again. She said things like, "You're ruining everything over nothing. He is nowhere to go. You're being heartless." And I'll be honest, hearing that did hit me a little. For about 5 seconds. But then I remembered. The weeks of being ignored. The groceries being taken. The strangers in my apartment. Being made to feel like I didn't belong in my own home. And that feeling disappeared. I told her, as calmly as I could, this situation didn't have to go this way. I asked for boundaries. I asked for a conversation. You shut it down every time. She didn't have a response to that, because it was true. The landlord gave her a formal notice. Mark had to leave immediately. For about 2 days, things were tense but quiet. Mark packed his stuff. And I won't lie, seeing it all piled up really drove home how much he had actually moved in.
Bags, clothes, kitchen stuff.
It wasn't a guest. It was a full move-in. The day he left, Lena didn't speak to me at all. Not a single word. And after that, something changed between us permanently. For the next couple of weeks, we barely interacted. No more shared conversations. No friendliness. Just two people existing in the same space. And honestly, even though it was awkward, it was also peaceful. No extra noise. No strangers. No tension about boundaries being crossed. I finally felt comfortable in my own apartment again. But the situation didn't fully end there. Because about 3 weeks later, Lena told me she was moving out. Not because she had to immediately, but because she didn't feel comfortable living with someone who would go behind her back. Which, honestly, felt ironic. But I didn't argue. At that point, I didn't want to fix things. I just wanted stability. She moved out about a month later. And that was that. No big goodbye. No resolution. Just over. After she left, I had to find a new roommate. And I'll be honest, I was way more cautious this time. When I met potential roommates, I didn't just talk about rent and cleaning schedules. I brought this situation up directly. I said something along the lines of, I had a previous roommate who let her partner essentially move in without contributing. It caused a lot of issues, and I won't tolerate that again. I'm completely fine with partners visiting, but not living here without agreement. Some people were clearly put off by how direct I was, which honestly helped me filter them out. Eventually, I found someone, Claire, 28F. And from the start, she appreciated the honesty. We agreed on everything up front: guest limits, shared expenses, communication. And so far, it's been great.
Calm.
Respectful. Exactly what I wanted in the first place. Now that everything has settled, I've talked to a few friends about the situation, and the reactions are mixed. Some say I did exactly what I needed to do. Others say I escalated too far by involving the landlord instead of trying harder to work it out. And a couple of people think I should have been more compassionate, given Mark's situation. I don't feel guilty anymore, but I do wonder if I handled it the best way. So now that you have the full story, AITA,